Welcome back. After the State of the Union last weekend, the winnowing down of the Democratic and Republican fields, we are on a collision course to Biden versus Trump, part 2. So let's talk about it with our panel tonight. Let's bring in Democratic strategist Calvin Dark on my immediate right, and on the far right, not necessarily so. Senior advisor to the National College Republicans, Chris Johnson, both up late with me tonight here on the Final Five. Good to see you both.
Good to be here.
So Chris has been in recently, so I will give you the first question here. As you saw what played out last week, State of the Union, the response, and the president's now really making the case as he more or less has clinched the nomination. What does he have to focus on? What has he done right, and what do you want to see him do differently?
I think Biden has two big challenges. One is to motivate the people that supported him in 2020 to come to the polls. I don't think he's worried about them switching to Trump or another third party. I think he's worried that they may stay on the couch. And so he's got to make that argument. Second challenge is he's got to figure out a way to convince independents and gettable non-MAGA Republicans that he can be an alternative to Trump. Now, I think that Trump has a unique ability to get people off the couch, because they want to be in the number of people who voted against him on the Democratic side. And I think that actually helps Biden make that argument to the people who might stay home.
And, you know, just to that point, to the extent of where you had in a lot of the primaries, the far left trying to get people to vote uncommitted for Biden, you know, you had the Georgia primary where you still had almost, I think, 19% at last check of Republicans voting for Nikki Haley after she dropped out of the race. So there are people on both sides of this both sides of this election who kind of fall into that category where they're not necessarily completely enthusiastic with who their party's nominee is going to be.
No, absolutely. I mean, you see it acutely with young people, especially. I mean, the uncommitted vote, you know, young left of center folks deeply concerned about the situation in Gaza, folks on the right that are just tired of the age thing. They're tired of dealing with the kinds of petty partisan stuff that we don't have a kind of political memory to justify. And then on top of that, you are just looking at older candidates. And so what politics is an addition game, not a subtraction game. And so to your point about Haley voters, you know, President Trump's got to look at that and figure out how to add those people to his coalition and not take them out. And that's not always his tendency, right? So if you can find a way to do that, we're looking pretty good heading into 2024. That being said, even with those folks saying they won't vote for Trump or they're thinking about staying home or whatever, Trump's still up in the polls, right? This is going to be a really good opportunity for a lot of us to make the positive case for Republicans and Republican policies in a pretty safe environment, but we can't take our foot off the gas.
Well, we know, and as Democrats full well know, if you pay attention to what the polls say all the way through 2016, we would be talking about Hillary Clinton once again here. That's certainly not the case that we're in. Do you buy the idea? Are you following the polls this much? I mean, there has to be, or do you subscribe that maybe where there's smoke, there's fire?
I think that the polls are important in that it shows Biden's not going to just get this for free, okay? But I don't think it necessarily signals that Trump would win, because I think people have a tendency to blame the person in power. And I also think that now people are starting, outside of D.C., people are starting to realize that yes, there will be a choice between Biden, and that's on both sides. Yeah. I've heard people outside of D.C. say, so Biden is running, right? You know, he's 81. And then I've heard also people say, you mean Trump actually can run because of his legal problems? I think once that sinks in, it will be a lot clearer choice.
You know, and as we look at all of this, and something that came out, I had a congressional candidate from Virginia on the show last week, Alicia Andrews. She's running in Virginia 10. She brought up something that was mentioned on MSNBC last week, because as we talk about issues, and clearly the border is going to be an issue, some people on MSNBC said, why are people in Virginia concerned about the border? I mean, the only border they have to worry about is West Virginia's border. But why, Chris, why have Republicans why have they struck a chord with many people when it comes to focusing on what's happening thousands of miles away from here?
Well, it's a vibe check, essentially. You're looking at an older president that does not seem fully in control of what's happening at the border, and that feeling is downstream from a sense that he's not really in control of anything. And so even if you're not necessarily an immigration hawk, or you're really concerned about the changing demographics or whatever, or your job or anything like that, you are concerned about just the chaos that you're seeing and the lack of control that the Biden administration seems to have. That's a legitimate concern for people. And watching MSNBC hosts talk down to voters and tell them that their #1 concern right now, which is immigration, is not legitimate, is exactly why the Democrats and the far left are often seen as elite and out of touch, and that's why people flock to candidates like President Trump, who are populists, who speak to the issues they care about and tell them they have valid concerns.
What do you think that Democrats can do on this issue, which, again, it struck a chord? You know, they've talked a lot about this bipartisan border compromise that did not go anywhere. Is there anything that you think they should do other than say, hey, we tried?
I think that argument's effective, because I'm going to tell you, before a couple of weeks ago, I agreed with a lot of what you said. Like, I'm going to be honest, I'm a Democrat, and for 3 years, I asked, what's our solution at the border? And when Biden had, in the negotiations, when he had to accept a deal that he knew was going to be unpopular with his base, I give him credit for doing that. And now we're in, like, bizarro world. Biden's out here in these streets promoting the plan that Republicans pressured him into agreeing to. And I think that that message is clear. Not that Biden has a solution, not that he hasn't done what he should have done over 3 years, but that when he did finally give in, the Republicans stopped him. If I was giving advice to Republicans, and they have not asked me, I would have, from a political standpoint, I would have supported the legislation, had him sign it, then from now to November, say, it was such a crisis, we got a Democrat to sign something they would have never signed before. Give us the House, Senate, and the White House, and imagine what we can do on the border. But they can't do that now.
I started with him. I want to give you the last word on this.
Yeah, I honestly, that last part I agree with. I think this would have been an opportunity for us to say how we twisted the arm of President Biden. We forced him and Democrats to agree to a bunch of stuff that they would have never agreed to in a different situation. And when you're trying to explain to voters the four-dimensional chess of we're doing this thing that is opposite of what you, the voters, want, so that we can help President Trump win in the fall of 24, it doesn't make a lot of sense to regular voters sitting at home that just want the problem solved. And so this is an opportunity for us to hopefully fix this and hopefully win and then solve it in the next term, but it was a missed opportunity for
All
sure.
right, so for you at home, this time I'll classify them as on the far left, and on my left,
it's the first time anybody's ever said that about me.
Well, I just wanted to balance it out there. Guys, thank you both. Thanks for coming. Good to see you both.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Final Five is back right after this.
Come